This is TWiT.
All right, so this has been a really challenging week, and I will fully admit it's been really emotional for many people, myself included. Very grim week. Supreme Court draft opinion that leaked that shows that Roe versus Wade was likely to be overturned in the coming months, and the impact that has on women's health. I mean, it's crazy what's going on right now. That action has actually sent tech companies on a path to understanding exactly how such an unprecedented undoing of law might impact the health of its female employees. And joining us to talk about this complicated and tumultuous, is probably the right word for it, turn of events, is Lizzy Lawrence from Protocol. Welcome to the show, Lizzy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Happy to get you on. Though I wish it were different circumstances, but here we are. And I think it's really important to shine a light on all facets of this as we continue on into the coming months. And the tech side, it's easy to think that this has nothing to do with tech, but actually there are a lot of angles with that technology intersects with exactly what's going on right now. And first of all, you wrote that this actually isn't the first time that tech companies have had to look into, things like abortion rights. This began in Texas last September. Talk a little bit about kind of how tech companies have made changes as a result of that Texas ban on abortions last year.
Yeah, so Texas's abortion ban was a huge deal in tech, particularly because throughout the pandemic, it was hailed as this new oasis for tech companies, right? And companies like Oracle and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise moved their headquarters to the state. So then once these companies were there, a lot of companies with significant presences had to grapple with having employees in a state with severely restricted reproductive care. So a lot of companies did stay quiet on this. My colleague Lizzy Lawrence wrote an excellent piece about the Texas abortion ban in particular. And as I recall, she didn't get a lot of direct answers, but there were some companies that were pretty vocal immediately, like Match Group and Bumble, pretty quickly set up funds for employees and dependents who needed to seek care outside of Texas. And Mark Benioff of Salesforce also tweeted out his support for employees and, promised to help them relocate if after the state passed its restrictive abortion law. So that was definitely that was an aspect that was important. And then the other kind of way that tech companies were really implicated with the Texas abortion law is that aiding and abetting clause, which said, anyone can be knowingly or unknowingly, anyone can be sued for knowingly or unknowingly helping someone get an abortion. So that could affect rideshare drivers, that could affect platforms like Facebook or Google, being forced to comply with subpoenas in abortion cases. So Lyft and Uber did pledge publicly to cover drivers' legal expenses in Texas and Oklahoma. The major tech platforms have not really spoken out yet about what they'll do.
Right. And what they'll do, facing, everything that's coming, that was a very, in that situation, very specifically kind of located to the state of Texas. Now we're looking at, all the states in one way or another being shaped and affected by this in the next couple of months. So a broader, if not complete strike down of Roe versus Wade is kind of on the table, if not assured. Some people feel like there's a possibility of unwinding that, but I don't know that I'm all too optimistic about that. What kind of direct impact might this have on tech companies, and in particular, big tech companies, when we're thinking about them as being the ones who haven't really acted on this yet? How, if you had to guess, or if there are any clues, what does that tell you?
Yeah, so there are a couple things I think about here, and I think about tech's responsibility to its users and to its employees. And in terms of users, kind of the aiding and abetting clause that I spoke about mentions, hints at some of the larger legal and surveillance issues and how much messier this becomes when it's, like you said, not just a few states, but potentially half the country. Tech companies big tech companies are going to have to decide, a lot of them really do tend to comply with, valid legal demands or valid legal subpoenas. So they'll, as these cases roll in, I know it's a draft opinion, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. As these cases roll in, they'll have to decide how much they'll disclose and how much they'll protect users. And I mean, and then the other thing, on the employee side is they'll have to decide how to best support their employees living in these states, and whether they'll expand employee health care, or potentially relocate employees. So lately, like a growing number of tech companies have decided to expand coverage by reimbursing employees for abortion-related travel. So Yelp announced that it would do this, and Citigroup and Apple and Match Group and Bumble also have similar policies. But yeah, it's definitely going to become messier as this, if Roe's overturned and it impacts half the country.
Sure. I mean, there's going to be, from the company's side, they're going to be forced into a position or placing themselves willingly into a position where they're taking a side on this. And that in turn has the potential of, putting them in the face of legal risk, potentially by supporting or protecting employees who travel for an abortion, as one example. What about the employees themselves? Because and you point this out in your piece, but it was kind of something that I hadn't considered until I read it, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's actually a really big deal. Finding yourself in a position to seek out an abortion is an incredibly private decision. However, when the lines start to get blurred between what a person chooses for themselves and what a person has to rely on their company and the company's support and benefits in order to move towards, some people just aren't going to feel comfortable doing that. Sounds like it's a pretty tricky scenario. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. That's a huge issue. And I mean, it shows some of the problems that arise when our health is so tightly linked with our employers, and when these, decisions on abortion and other healthcare issues are, kicked from the national level to really become corporations' responsibilities. So, and abortion in particular is so stigmatized. People are starting to, slowly come out and talk. People who've received abortions are starting to talk about that. Musician, Phoebe Bridgers tweeted about it, her experience a few days ago, and a cohort of Congress people have kind of spoken out about it too. But it's definitely hard to talk about, and it's not something you might want to yet disclose to your boss or, file a reimbursement claim for. So that's where the importance of company culture and speaking out comes in. I mean, some companies are not going to be willing or unwilling to weigh in on abortion. Like Hewlett Packard explicitly told me that they don't take a position on it, though they do cover the procedure out of state, or for employees who need to travel to get abortions out of state. But if you're a company that does want to expand abortion access for your employees, you really might want to consider being more vocal about your desire for that, and emphasize be transparent that, and emphasize that this is something that will is handled sensitively, that there will be no judgment or stigma around, that really the company does want to provide help employees get abortion care with no criteria or qualifications, just being upfront about that.
Yeah, I think that's wise. Now, we've seen in the last couple of years, thanks in no small part to COVID, this ever kind of shifting, some might say evolving attitude around work from home. Companies, definitely a couple of years ago that may not have felt very positively about letting their employees work full time from home are now considering that. There's kind of a change happening. Some companies are holding steadfast, to coming into the office, but other companies are broadening that out, like Airbnb, for example. And it occurs to me that some employers might best actually protect their employees by not requiring them to live and to work in a state that isn't hospitable to women's reproductive rights. So what are your thoughts there? Do you think this could actually act to further broaden work from home policies? Like that could be one kind of tool in the toolbox for companies to provide support for employees in this way?
Definitely. I think that's one of the easiest things employers can do, is offer to relocate employees, or really, get rid of requirements making employees stay in a certain state. And a lot of these big tech companies are, the work is more flexible and not tied to, factory or in-person work. So it is really plausible for them to allow their employees freedom of movement. And I think, we've talked, there's been a lot of conversation about recruitment and retention, and, working from home is really just table stakes at this point for a lot of these tech companies and for candidates. So, definitely implementing this, especially in the context of, the draft opinion and Roe possibly being overturned. If you want, particularly for companies who want to diversify their workforce, or who really prioritize workplace equity, candidates might not want to work for companies that don't make up for this gap in healthcare, or they might not want to work in states with laws that limit their reproductive freedoms or other kinds of freedoms, or laws they fundamentally don't believe in. So I think, definitely that is a route that a lot of companies have already taken and will continue to take.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. And then finally, you didn't write this article, but your colleague Ben Brody wrote about the privacy implications facing tech companies in light of abortion eventually becoming illegal, potentially here in the U.S. And we have Texas as the example to look towards, as far as like what that might look like. Just a couple of days ago, there was the news about SafeGraph and the sharing of information there of women seeking abortions, and kind of the impact of that. And the potential impact on a broader scale. What are your thoughts there as far as around these privacy implications and what that might look like as we head forward into the coming months?
Yeah. So, we already know that our online activity is meticulously tracked and in most cases monetized. But this just throws that into sharper relief and shows, some of the very real world serious implications that has. So, SafeGraph, I think there was another story or reporters talking about another kind of data broker today that is, has just a plethora, a plethora of information on people visiting family planning clinics and abortion clinics. And there is really, with, an aiding and abetting clauses and laws, there will really be a market for that and people who are looking for that information. So Ben, my colleague Ben wrote about the importance of digital hygiene for people, individuals seeking abortion care and using the internet to do that, and how it'll be really important to use encrypted platforms or, incorporate ad blockers. But it's tough because, it'll be really interesting to see because, I saw people pointed this out, but we haven't lived in an internet post-Roe world. Like this was, 1973, the internet was not a thing in the way it is now. So it will be scary and enlightening to see how, how people use the internet to get information out, but then how people also weaponize it and are able to, how companies or data brokers will what platforms will be, what information they'll be forced to, or might choose to provide in, court cases concerning abortion. So I think there's a lot of rightful concerns about what privacy and digital surveillance will look like in a post-Roe world.
100%. Well, Lizzy, really appreciate you taking time to join us to talk about this incredibly important issue. Lizzy Lawrence, of course, writes for protocol.com. If folks want to find this article, of course, they can go to Protocol. But if they want to find you online and follow the work you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at LizzyLaw_, and my email is llawrence@protocol.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So reach out to me in any of those ways.
Excellent. Thank you. Keep up the great work, Lizzy. We appreciate your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.